Okay, boom, you're on the spot. It's
All right.
recording. Now your pressure's on.
Oof.
It's always so funny though how quickly, not now, but sometimes it'll be a totally different tone when you know it's being recorded. So I have this close friend of mine, Michael, who was supposed to be before you, and then uh, you're both MS. Both your initials are MS, which is kind of funny. Um, but yeah, he's the kind of guy where if we chatted and it was recorded, it would be a completely different thing, and it's different with different
Oh
people.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. It's just like you become conscious of the camera, but I think we're also used to Zoom now. That I think we can probably
it should
just
be
skirt
fine.
past that.
I've been using Zoom so much lately too with my students, so I'm used to it.
Okay, Maurícia, hello, and walk me through l- September 2017 to October 2020 in as many or as few words as you like.
Okay, that's a bit of a challenge, but I'll do my best. Um, okay, so 2017 was the end of my undergrad. I was working towards grad school at that time. It was definitely a journey. It was not easy at all to get into the program I'm in or I just finished right now. Um, so my dream was speech language pathology. And to get in, you had to have the marks, you had to have volunteering experience, you had to have reference letters and a good letter of intent. So that's basically what I was working on for the last few years of undergrad, getting the rest of like the courses I needed for my degree, but also getting all the prerequisites done too.
So,
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no worries. I was just gonna say that then after that I ended up doing my master's and I just finished. So
So you just finished, I guess, in the spring, or did you? Because master's degrees are different, right? You can finish kind of whenever you like, more or less.
so what makes this program really unique is that it's not a research-based program. It's not a research-based master's, I mean, it's a professional clinical master's. So there's no thesis, but instead we do a portfolio and we have placements spread out throughout the master's program. So it really prepares you to become a clinician more so than a researcher. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with people. I like people. As much as I like research, that wasn't the area I wanted to focus in. So, because it's not really a thesis research based master's, there is a time to end. Like, that's more concrete. Yeah. So, we were supposed to finish mid July, but with COVID, it got delayed. So, I actually just finished a month ago.
That's awesome. So, as you were speaking, I thought of a question, and basically it was just, I think that you and I are similar in the sense that both of us, maybe I've misunderstood, but both of us seem to have known for a long time and for a long while what it is we wanted to do outside, or not outside, but after undergrad. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And even in undergrad, I would consider like, maybe I'm really hedging all my bets and on this one thing here, and we'll see how it goes. So for me, I always knew I was going to go to law school for better or for worse. Um, and there's of course pros and cons to that. So my question for you is, you, if I understand correctly, you knew you always wanted to do speech. Here, watch me stumble over speech pathology. Perfect.
I can help you with that.
Please, please do. It is a running theme of this entire thing that I've been doing for the last month and a half is I pretend to be this anyway, but it's just this endless stream of noise. But you knew that from way back. But did you always want to do it? And did you find that in the application process for the master's degree, the fact that you were able to say with true, like with absolute honesty, listen, this is what I want to do. I think that comes across in the application. Do you agree? How did it go for you?
So when I first started undergrad, I didn't even know speech language pathology existed.
Mm.
Um, and that seems to be like a really common theme in the field. It's not super well known. It's not like law school or law, like, it's med school. That's really common. So when I got into my biology and psychology like double major, I didn't know I wanted to become an SLP, which is what I'm going to refer it to from now on because it is a bit of a mouthful.
Mhm, mhm.
So, it wasn't until my second year, beginning of discovered what SLP is. And it was through talking to people, through volunteering in a research lab, and going to career fairs too. That's how I found out what it was, and I discovered that it was really something I wanted to do. From that point on, I was really determined to like become an SLP. Um, when I talked to other people in the program, they they had similar experiences. They didn't know what it was at first. But I would say that there were maybe like one or two people that knew that that's what they wanted to be almost their entire lives.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, because I think I'm getting my timelines mixed up because if I maybe I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, I think in England you were talking about it because we were going into our fourth year after the trip. So it must, yeah, was that right? You said, I think you just said third and fourth year. I guess that fits squarely with England, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So at the end of my third year, I think that's when I went to England. And in Oxford, I had already known that that's what I wanted to be. So yeah, when I met you, I already had it all figured out.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I have a bit of an inaccurate view, but accurate in the little time frame,
Yeah.
where I met you. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So that's interesting. Did you find even still though, Mauricia, like I think that even knowing what you want to do before you graduate from undergrad is just an enormous leg up because I have many friends who have told me and you see it where and I'm not disparaging this. I mean, this is just natural, and a lot of people find themselves in this position, and Godspeed. But it can be tough if you're in third or fourth year and you don't know what you want to do. And I think a lot of people are in that boat, and it's encouraging to know that you can decide in third or fourth year, and everybody's definition of late is different, but you can decide in third and fourth year, and if you're doing well enough in general, you stand a good chance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely very true. I felt like I was behind in comparison to a lot of people in my classes because when you're in life science, you're surrounded by people who want to get into med school or dental school or
That's a great
um,
point.
yeah, so you're surrounded by people who have known that that's what they want to do right from the get-go. And for me, I had already discovered that in high school, that wasn't something I wanted to do. I don't think I would do it for the right reasons. If I went into med school or something like that, it would be just for money, and that's not something I would be passionate about. Um, so for me to figure out what I was passionate about, it took some time. And yeah, that's why I felt like I was really late to it when I was in third year, second year.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that. I mean, it seems obvious now that you say it, but it didn't even occur to me until you just said it that you'd have a lot of classmates where, life sci, biology, whatever. I mean, you're really starting to funnel your career prospects. Um, Whereas, I mean, even in the humanities, there's no way you can't guess. Like if you held someone at gunpoint and said what, and you had to, this makes no sense. But if you had to guess just based on two majors, I don't think you could. Um, with me, however, when I told people English and poli sci, you can probably guess the only two guesses I would get overwhelmingly are you're going to be a teacher, be it a prof or an elementary or high school teacher, and then they'd kind of scoff, which was like, okay, well, screw you guys, how dare you? But they'd scoff, and then I'd say, well, no, I'm hoping to get into law school, and then all of a sudden their whole tone changes, and it's like, you know what, you like in the span of 15 seconds, it's amazing how people can attach such significance to, oh, life science, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be a vet, you're gonna be a dentist. But
Mhm.
good for you. My question now is about in England, did you find that because you were in the psych class, I was in the criminology class, was there
Yeah.
anything relevant to your future status as an SLP in that class, or was it more macro level sort of stuff? Because I never even asked you that.
Oh, 100% it had everything to do with SLP. It was probably one of the best courses I've ever taken. And it actually helped me a lot when I was writing my letter of intent because I drew on what I learned in the course, which was about disability. And that's essentially what you're working
Oh,
with.
that's right. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that was the X factor in that course. Oh my God, you're bringing it back for me. Okay, yes.
You're
That,
welcome. Yeah.
okay, keep going. Sorry. That's
No, no,
awesome.
the worst. Yeah, so when I talked about disability and how I learned it abroad and how I took all sorts of different perspectives around it and what it meant to me, and I had such a unique view about it, and that I think made me really stand out in grad school. So yeah, I think it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Also meeting you and other people. So yeah, it was really worth it.
Well, much appreciated.
Mhm.
Likewise. So maybe now is the opportunity for me to. We're all over the map with this chat, which is the way I want it to go anyway. But now is the opportunity for me to bring up my story, and it's not a sexy story. It's really literally just we were. I think this was after the punting day. I think it must have been because even the punting excursion was pretty late in the trip, but this was even later. I think this was a mad dash to get souvenirs. So we were on Broad Street and not the official bookstore, but a store nearby. And anybody who goes to Oxford is and happens to watch this perhaps is going to be like, how dare you, you fool, not know where different things are. But I think it was Broad Street, and we were at the A store. And I bought a couple watercolors there, but I remember the two of us. You were the only other person I knew in the entire shop, and the line was like wrapping around through and around shelves, and then this is where it starts to cross into dream territory where I'm not entirely sure if this part of it is real, but I know we were both pretty peeved at someone taking a very long time. And it was one of those, it was like out of a sitcom because it wasn't just you and me. It was you and me and a collection of other strangers who were clearly also not from England, let alone Oxford. And they were just so peeved that this woman was having such difficulty. And and you
This
want
was
to
the
talk
bookstore, right?
I think so. Yeah. And
Yeah, like the
does it
Oxford bookstore, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, isn't that coming
Yeah.
back? It's
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
it's all coming
crazy.
back to
Yeah.
me. Mhm.
And you want to talk about her like group mob mentality. I wasn't that bothered, but then I saw other people getting mad and we were even further back in line, so we're like, all right, now I'm furious at this total stranger. And I remember it's such a stupid little memory, but I remember it because that's the beauty of those trips is it's like you have such unique memories with like discrete individuals where my Oxford experience with you is different than with Eric, than with Alex, than with whomever.
For sure.
So that was really exciting, and it's amazing to me how, but not entirely amazing or surprising, but it's amazing how close we all became, especially when I look at the UTM people, and that's my next question for you, because I sat and I thought about it this morning before I was getting ready. I was like, what should I ask Maurícia? And if it had not been for that trip, we would never have met. There's really no likelihood at all that we would have met
Probably
ever,
not.
which is pretty crazy, which makes it all the more exciting. And these friendships are that much more precious because friendships made on trips are very dear, assuming you had a good time. But
Yeah.
there's always there's at least me, maybe I'm a nutcase, but there's always this lingering thought that you could have maybe met these people and this on campus. But with you guys, with you and Eric and Alex and some others, never would have happened. So I want to ask you about UTM, and because I know nothing about it. So what would you say UTM was like on your way to it, third and fourth year, and then your thoughts of it in
Yeah,
retrospect?
sure. I First of all, I loved UTM. So I
You're
actually,
allowed to. I'm just
yeah, I'm just remembering first year and how we would go downtown and people would always like judge you in a way, like, oh, you go to UTM.
UTM,
And
UTM, who dem, who dem. Yeah,
yeah,
that was our
exactly.
chant.
Yeah, I remember these chants.
Those were the best. Okay, go. Sorry.
That's okay. And I remember thinking like I applied downtown and I got in. I rejected you guys. Like I
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't want
Okay.
to go downtown. I actually picked UTM. So I felt like those chants didn't make any sense to me. But
You're full of it because if you had gone downtown, you'd be singing them yourself. So this is how the mob works. We don't think, we just scream.
this is true. That's very true. Fair enough. Um But yeah, so I'll start with like I loved UTM. It was a really good community, and for me, I loved being able to meet people and then see them in the hallway the next day.
Mm,
That was big. I joined a lot of different student clubs, and that connected me to so many people on campus. Um, and so from there, like I felt like I knew so many, like I felt like I was walking around high school again, you know, like everywhere I go, everywhere I turn, I find somebody I know. And it was a nice feeling, you know, I felt like I had some, like a support group as I was learning, you know? So yeah, I like that atmosphere. I like that it was in a forest in the middle of nowhere. I could walk around and relax. The deer would like run into you on your way to class. It was crazy.
that's beautiful. So, did you grow up close to there? Is that was part of it? Okay, no way.
No, no, I live in Toronto and I had access to a car. So I would just drive there. It was a 30-minute drive. I was going against traffic, so it was really easy
Mm,
for me. Whenever I hear some people that live in Toronto and they know that I commuted to Mississauga every day, they look at me like I'm crazy. But when you have access to a car, it's really not bad. I think if I had to commute there by TTC or like by bus or something, that would be a different story.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, for me, it worked out. I used my car as a locker. Had all my stuff in there. And if I went downtown, I wouldn't have a good reason to take my car. Um, Parking is a pain, and it, it would actually take almost the same amount of time. So I felt, oh, you know what? I'll just drive to Mississauga. It's fine. And I loved it. So
That's awesome. Yeah, and if you are going west, you are going against traffic. So, wasn't your master's was downtown, was it not? Was it not U of T downtown?
yeah, it was. But
What
we
building
weren't,
was that in?
oh, it was on University Avenue, 500 University.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that's okay.
it's totally far off of campus.
Mm,
It's hidden amongst all of like the hospitals on that street. It's called the Rehabilitation Sciences Building, and it's part of the Faculty of Medicine.
terrific.
Yeah.
So, what now? So walk me through because I mean, I'm not alone when I say that March, but I guess February was the last sane sort of typical month. And then now everything's I mean, now we're even getting used to this thing. So I think a lot of people are making that sort of mental adjustment. And if you watch even a month and a half ago a video I posted where I just kind of sat and there was no plan to do this. I just kind of sat down and thought, all right, well, let's just chat. Um, Totally different tone, like really uptight, kind of flustered. So walk me through the concluding pick a number 3 6 9 months of your masters, and I mean you just finished, so I guess the question, Mauricia, is tell me, I mean just in general, tell me, like, share whatever you'd like about your masters and your path to becoming a an SLP, and then maybe let me know how COVID impacted that, because graduating in the middle of this would be really tough, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I'm really lucky and fortunate that they finished the program when they did because it was all very up in the air. The way it works with our program is you have to have a certain number of clinical hours. So working with actual clients or patients. And
Mhm.
and we get a lot of those in our last placement, but because hospitals were not taking students, and a lot of the placements were just like shut down or we were really like concerned about if we were going to be able to get those hours. Luckily some places they switched to online services, so it was fine for me. I did it in person at a hospital, so that worked out. um, in terms of like my coursework, it wasn't too bad because we had done the bulk of it last year. So moving on to 2 months of coursework, March and April online wasn't too bad. The material was pretty chill.
Mm.
So yeah, that wasn't too bad. It was more of the placement that got delayed, and waiting for that to happen was a bit of a worry, but it all worked out in the end. Everyone finished in time. Some people just finished their placements a week ago. Yeah. So the way it works as well with SLP is we have to be registered with our college. So we cannot be practicing unless we're registered, and it's sort of like a license, and that takes time too. So it takes like a month to process. So I'm actually still waiting for mine to process, because it's not done yet. The hiring process kind of is affected.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the hiring happened in August, like for school boards, for example. So a lot of us missed that because we were still in placements, and applying would have been um, okay. Like we could apply, but the chances of us getting the job, being able to work in September is very unlikely. So that sort of affected and impacted our job hunting, you could say. Um, in terms of SLP, I find the more people I talk to, the more common it seems to be. But I don't know. I feel like it's still one of those fields that like not a lot of people know about and how like involved we are. So yeah, I really want to advocate and like advertise what SLP is all about more. And I actually am planning to launch my own online store. So this is me with my little plug.
Awesome. I love it.
It's gonna be merchandise that's SLP related. Right now, it's gonna be focused on mugs, custom designed by me, and it's called For Laura. So,
So why is it called For Laura?
so the word started as fora. So in Portuguese, it means outside. I
Hmm.
wanted to ship things out, and I like the word fora, but I thought For Laura sounded better. It rhymed. And also Fora was taken, so For Laura it is.
And that's for like the name Laura?
Foralora.
One more time, Maurícia.
Foralora. It's
Oh,
the same spelling.
you know what? I misheard you and I thought you said
Oh,
for one like English for Laura. And I thought, "Oh, who's Laura and what's the what was who died and like why God bless you. Why are you who's Laura?" Like no, that's cool. That's a great
yeah.
I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that I encourage and love when people are try these little entrepreneurial projects because more than anything, it's just a good exercise in maybe not to romanticize it too much, but at least in my case with this, but also I can imagine with what you plan on doing, there's a bit of like identity creation as well. Because when I sit and I chat with friends or I chat solo, or in your case, you're going to be selling merch, it's like the thought that the thinking that has to go into that is actually far more extensive than it sounds. Oh, he's just recording videos. Oh, she's just getting mugs out there. It's like, well, yeah, but what's it going to look like? How are you going to distribute it? How do you share that idea? It becomes
Mhm.
vastly more complicated right away. So I really do commend you. So that's terrific, and keep me updated on that because I'd love a mug. Um, but tell me, Mauricio, because you mentioned a minute ago, you mentioned September. Is that when people get their placements? So you've been hired, let's say hypothetically. Why does it begin in September? Is it tied to school? Because I too profess total ignorance as to what's entailed excuse me, as to what being an SLP entails and what the next steps for you or anybody in your position would actually be, assuming no COVID, right? Like you just graduated. What would the typical next steps be, and what's the connection to September? Let's say it's a
So
lot
the
there. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. The typical placements usually occur 4 times throughout the 2-year program. They happen right after you do some coursework that's related to that placement. Only at U of T. That's what makes U of T unique. So in the beginning, in first year, usually it's focused on kids. So you have a placement in a school board or in a private practice working with kids. Then in second year, it's more focused on adults, so like stroke patients. And that translates into a lot of hospital placements. So in the end, we finish off with usually an adult placement because of COVID that was affecting our hospitals And then that delayed a lot of um, our final placements and finishing the program. Now, in terms of hiring afterwards, typically we would finish in July. Our registration process would happen in August, and then September we could start working. That's great for the school board because that's when the schools start.
Mhm.
If you want to work in a private practice or in a hospital, then that can happen anytime. But it just happened to be that um, the hiring process for school boards, for example, was a bit impacted. And then in the end, you have a lot of people competing for like the same jobs, right? So that's something that's been affected by COVID. But normally it's not really a big deal, like September or not.
So your next steps then, so you just told me before I hit record that you're applying for a job. You don't have to divulge any specifics or anything, but what would that job or similar jobs have you be doing on a daily basis? What does that look like?
So the job that I applied for is a private clinic. So they work with adults and kids, something that I like to work with, which is both. And with kids, it's like what you would normally imagine as an SLP. Okay, they have a lisp or they have a stutter, something like that. With adults, you think of stroke patients, but SLPs don't just work with talking and listening and stroke patients, they also work with swallowing disorders. So that's also something that we can work with. And accent modification if they want. So
Oh,
that's
that's
another,
very interesting.
yeah,
That's
that's
really
also,
cool.
yeah, so that's another area for adults. Another really interesting one that you might be most interested in is high level communication. So working with executives, CEOs, lawyers, um, academia, professors, etc. So that is where SLPs also play a role. But that's not what you would typically think. You know, they're not people with disorders. They're people that just want to communicate better in their day-to-day like jobs. Um, and that's an area that unfortunately is not touched upon a lot in school, but it is an area that you can work in.
That's really cool. And I was about to ask you, do you find that, let's just adjust this because I'm slouching. This chair is really comfortable, but the setup has me slouching in a really odd way. Um, but
Okay, no
anyway,
worries.
back to the back to the topic at hand. Yeah, my question for you was, do you find that your own speech and the way you speak, and I'm not even speaking about intonation or inflection, I mean just cadence and even speed, do you think that that's been affected by your studies and your work? Do you think, or is that a bit of a reach?
I mean, I think to teach somebody to communicate, you have to be a good communicator. But if you do want to work in an area that is helping people communicate really well and they don't have a disorder, then you do need a certain type of training. You need some specialization in that area, something that I personally will fully disclose I do not have because I'm just fresh out of grad school. But if that's an area that I wanted to get into, I could if I wanted to. I could learn more. I could grow those skills, develop them, and become specialized in that area, work with that population if I really wanted to. So that's really exciting about the field.
That is amazing, and it's amazing to me just how much more is involved in most professions, but especially SLP as you're describing it. I mean, I hadn't even considered accent modification. These are the things that just would not, cross my radar at any point. What I am conscious of, and I joke about it, and I was joking about it with you a minute ago, but in all seriousness, what I grapple with all the time is my own speech, which I'm all the more aware of in this sort of environment, in this setting, but specifically speech patterns and the speed at which I speak, um, even to the micro level. And of course, I'm not versed in any of the actual any of the science behind it as you are. But even just from the layperson's perspective, it's fun to watch and you've been there yourself in the university environment. It's fun to watch certain academics speak, and then I, of course, moving from undergrad to law school specifically, have been learning and observing how lawyers speak, and it really is, maybe there's a word for it, but it really is almost like it's, I wouldn't call it a dialect, I wouldn't go that far, but it's very, very much, in keeping with that, where I'm kind of doing it even right now, because this isn't how I would normally be speaking. I would be uh, a little more rapid and a little less hesitant. So it is interesting. That's why I asked you if you noticed that even your own speech personally in your private life, in your personal life with friends, whatever, if you found yourself communicating a little more differently than you would have at 17 or 18. I have a question for you though about speech patterns in general, because you hear a lot, and I'm actually fascinated by human beings, surprise, surprise, and specifically about communication methods. And there are so many different phenomena, um, that I've read about that I know nothing about, but as it pertains to the human voice and how people perceive them. So you get those stereotypes about, oh, women not speaking or not sounding or appearing as authoritative as they might otherwise actually be, and often are. Do you guys ever touch that when you were in your when you were taking your studies? Is that something that came up? But I know that your focus, of course, was on actual corrective. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Take it away.
Yeah, so it's true. We did mostly focus on the corrective
Mhm.
um, uh, area of SLP, but we did touch a little bit on that, not too much. I do remember either it was in class or maybe I did this leisurely on my own time. I can't really remember, but I did watch a video, and maybe you've seen it. I don't know if it's really well known online, but it's where they teased apart women on Jeopardy, and
No, no.
they found that they were when they would give their answer, or in Jeopardy's case, the question, they used an uncertain intonation. So when they would respond, they would usually say it like they were questioning it, like they weren't sure. And they found that the women that were the most successful, they actually spoke in that way. And the males that were the most successful were the ones that would respond with the most certainty. And I don't know why that is, and I have no idea where that comes from. But I found that so fascinating that the way that you speak and your intonation can be almost a predictor of what will happen. Whether that is an actual predictor or if that's just a fluke or a correlation, who knows, right? It sounds more like a correlation to me, but it's like an interesting thought. Maybe it has more of an effect on how we think. Maybe in her mind, she just needs to portray herself as uncertain. I don't know. I don't know, but it's really interesting question that you brought up.
Yeah, I just I sit and I chat with my girlfriend, I chat, with my mom, and she herself is hunting for jobs like a lot of people right now. And, I mean, what do I know? This is all anecdotal, observational sort of, evidence, if you could call it that. But yeah, it is like it is, I can just say, like, culturally, and of course only from an anecdotal or personal perspective, um there is something about confidence involved. But it's weird how with Jeopardy it makes no sense, because you either know the answer or you don't. And so presumably as soon as you're hitting the button, it's a guess anyway, so your tone shouldn't even matter. Like, is it, yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. But what you can hopefully tell me about, of course, is, and this is what I've been dying to ask you about, is with kids, is the science behind a lisp, let's say, why it is that children do that. And it's usually children. There aren't many, more children than adults have lisps, I would have to imagine. Is it a developmental thing? How does that unfold usually?
It is developmental. Usually that's the case. Oftentimes it's just how their brain is wired. They're born that way. And over time, that's when you start to notice it more, right? And it doesn't go away, right? The lisp doesn't go away, and that's when it needs to be corrected as early as possible. And that's why you see more kids with it than adults, because it's usually corrected um, as quickly as possible. But yeah, and it is developmental. I don't know how much else to explain it, but I mean, if you were to find something disorderly with someone's sound when they're an adult, that's oftentimes because of perhaps a brain injury or some sort of neurological problem.
So what's the sort of work that you guys do with someone who's suffered a stroke? Because in some sense, based on what I'm hearing, you're you're actually teaching someone how to speak. It's almost like what parents do inadvertently with their children when they're exposing them to the world. And of course, I'm not equating someone who's suffered something horrific as a stroke to children, but of course, well, in 2020, you have to explain everything, right? God forbid you're misunderstood. But in all seriousness, though, that's a fascinating thing because it is such a tragic, you know, to say nothing of the other effects of a stroke, but it is such a tragic component that it is so devastating to one's speech. So what sort of work does that look like, Mauricio? Helping someone restore or at least improve uh, damaged speech. How does that go? How does that usually unfold?
Yeah, so I actually had the opportunity to work with stroke patients a lot in my last placement. And normally, when we see them in a rehab hospital, they're pretty medically stable. That's not always the case. I did work in a hospital like Sunnybrook where I was seeing patients in critical care, like hooked up to tubes, machines, ventilators. They couldn't breathe on their own. I was seeing those patients. But with stroke patients down the road in rehab hospitals, we play a role in their communication for sure. So not only are we helping them to make sure that they can speak, if that is a realistic goal for them, we're helping them communicate. And you don't have to speak to communicate. That's something that people sometimes forget, right? Like maybe there's a good example of deaf children and adults, right? The deaf community, they don't speak, but they can communicate in other ways. Um, and that's the same thing when you have a stroke patient. Sometimes they have such a severe stroke that maybe it's not realistic. Maybe they may not come out of that speaking fluently. It's hard to know. You don't know that right from the start. You can be hopeful for the best, of course. You always want to make sure that they get the best, but you don't know. Uh, at the end of the day, you just want to teach them to communicate. So whether that's speaking, whether that's using a communication board, sometimes they use iPads to communicate. So that's all thought about very carefully. A lot of background knowledge is put into that. Um, so that's the communication piece. Then there's also the swallowing piece that people seem to not even realize that we're a part of. And that's a bit more life or death. So
Wow.
uh, yeah, it's a big deal because maybe not as much when they're a rehab patient because they are medically stable, but it can be life or death because if food or water goes into your lungs, you can die. And that's something we prevent. So we do all sorts of assessments. We do all sorts of tests and we make sure that what they're eating is going to go down the right way and that they'll be fine if they have breakfast or if they have lunch. So that's something we look at first and then we take care of the communication.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. It's amazing just to hear about, how much we take for granted yeah, you moved me from one mind I won't, a mind blown kind of moment to right to another. Well, because I was reacting to what you were saying and I was going to say that communication is so precious. I mean, it's in many ways it's what distinguishes us from other animals. Um,
Yeah.
actually, predominantly that I would say, but no. And then you follow up that comment with what you said earlier about swallowing, and it's like that's probably even more fundamental than the ability to communicate. I mean, that you need to eat before you need to communicate.
Yeah.
That's that's incredible, Mauricia, and it's amazing to me how little I know about it, how little most people know about it. I don't know if Do you find yourself having how many times have you had conversations like these, like you're having with me, and you're like, okay, enough? Like, are you running a script on your scrawled on your hand? You're like, okay, here are the talking points for idiots who don't know what SLP is.
I do get the question a lot, so it's true. It's pretty common, even with my own patients. It's really, really funny, actually. I you have to have a good sense of humor. So I see a lot of patients, and usually when we first see them, it's for swallowing, right? Because that is like make sure that they are eating. Uh, and it's the conversation that you have is hilarious because you introduce yourself as, I mean, I was a student, but my clinical educator is the speech language pathologist. I'm here to look at your swallowing. And they're like, what in the world are you doing with my swallowing?
Wow. So even the patients themselves are like, I haven't. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I feel like they need to change our career name or something.
Well, you got an S and an L in the acronym, so swallow. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really funny when they are like looking at you and they're a bit dazed too, all sorts of medications that they're on. They're like, "What do you mean you're gonna look at my swallowing? Aren't you gonna
How
teach me how to talk?"
how do you instruct a person to swallow? Like this is like telling someone how to. I think it's probably easier to tell someone how to breathe than it is to tell someone how to swallow. Now I feel like I can't do it. Not to make light of it, but it is a bit of a weird function. How do you instruct? How does that even happen?
Yeah, it's something we totally take for granted. We don't even think about it. And these patients have to kind of be taught to think while they're eating, essentially. Um, it's not as much teaching how to swallow, but we're actually managing them. So if they are not going to be safe enough to eat anything, if it's going down the wrong way, then we modify their food. We give them a different type of texture. We try it out and see if that works. Um, it's sort of a science behind it.
Is there a case where, or excuse me, are there cases where this is it? An individual, unfortunately, will be limited to only these foods forever. Does that happen?
Yeah, we try and try to prevent that from happening always, right? But it is possible that sometimes they're going to have to be on this type of food. And at the end of the day, it's their choice, right? So if they want to accept the risks, then that's their decision. Usually they don't. Usually they're like, no, I want to continue living and eating and all that. So they will go with whatever you recommend. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's really hard. It's a hard conversation to have because we all like to eat and we like to eat what we like to eat, right? So
Exactly. Exactly. Are you thinking of doing a PhD? I you don't you can we can wait until the phone. I look, if anybody can ramble on end, I can do it. I you're in good hands here as the phone rings.
yeah, sorry.
No, no, that's okay. That's okay. Um, are you thinking PhD or no? Are you done with the books and school?
Right now, I'm going to focus on my clinical skills. I could, I haven't ruled out doing a PhD. I would have to sort of backtrack a bit, get my research skills in check again, um, and then go into it. But yeah, as much as I love research, which I do, I really, really enjoy research. It's not something I've ruled out. I would love to do it and come back to it at some point in the future. But right now, I think the best thing for me to be a really good SLP would be to focus on my clinical skills, really develop them, and then later on come back to research.
So what's I mean, I should have asked this earlier, but what cemented becoming an SLP in your mind? Like there may not have been a light bulb over your head sort of moment, but if there was, I'd be curious to hear about that because you hear people talk about their careers and their lives as if those are the sorts of experiences they have where all of a sudden they go, oh wait, I was in traffic on the way to the office and I thought, okay, I'm never going to do this again. I'm going to go do that. You and I being younger, who are actually we're actually getting to the starting line and then actually beginning our careers, it's a little bit of a different experience. So I'm wondering, was there a moment or a series of moments where you thought, oh, I like this. Oh yes, I really like this. Oh, absolutely, I'm going to apply. Was there anything like that?
I think
I
it
know
was
you
a
mentioned
series.
Yeah, because I know you mentioned clubs and I know you mentioned um encountering it, but yeah, let me hear how it just became a firmer reality in your head.
Okay. Yeah, it was a series of events, I would say. I don't know about how it worked with you for law school, but for me, I again, like I didn't know what it existed, so I had to sort of like piece it together and figure out what it meant and what it was. And when I found out what it involved, I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'd like." It's a combination of teaching, a combination of healthcare. I always knew I wanted to do healthcare. I can put together what I learned in biology and psychology, and I'm helping people. And there's also an element of language, and I didn't even know I liked linguistics. I took a course and I loved it. I fell in love with it. So that was also incorporated into it. And I feel like I'm the type of person that I like to always keep busy. I always have a lot of things going on. And this is an area, a field that has so much diversity. I can do almost anything with it. I can work in a hospital. I can work in a private clinic. I can open my own private clinic. I can I can work in the school board. I can work with kids. I can work with adults. I can specialize. The options never end, and that to me is really appealing. So,
That's terrific. Yeah, that's what I think we chatted about that a little earlier about how these things start to um, bloom and butterfly out, and all of a sudden there's more to it than you thought. With me, no, there was never really a distinct oh wow, I'd like to be a lawyer. It's actually it's more ingrained with me, which, as I said before, is both good and bad. It's good because, I'll put it in the past tense. It was good because throughout undergrad, I never once changed my major. I never once made any sort of adjustment. I knew that I was good at English. I got into U of T on the basis of my English grades. I think maybe I'm wrong, um, but then I was also fascinated by politics, but particularly, and I think I mentioned this with some previous people that I've chatted with, but particularly political philosophy. So it wasn't so much uh, tracking voting patterns and sociological behavior. It was only interested in sociology and demographics as it pertains to the organizing of a society. So that was the political side that always fascinated me, and then there was the English side, which from high school I liked English. I'd love to read. I'd like to regurgitate ideas and see how they fit. Um, and it's kind of an offshoot of my love of people. I mean, I'm actually so fascinated every day. I'm very naive in this way, by how few people not love or hate other people, because there are some people who are on either side of that spectrum, but who pay no mind to human beings whatsoever. Like, they are people, they're humans, and then they go through life, and to them, other people are like trees or other parts of the physical world. Whereas for me, life without people would not be a life at all. And I'm sure you can sympathize as someone who wants to do healthcare. So
oh,
for
for sure.
me, yeah. So for me, it was as simple as this, Mauricia. It was just, this is what I like. This is what I'm good at. I can't do math at all. I mean, but I can write you a paper on how I can't do math. um, and so as I started to refine my focus in those majors, it really narrowed me down to what I could do, at least in the immediate short term. But knowing that I was going to do law was helpful. That was the good side. It meant that I didn't have to second guess anything. The obvious drawback there is that you really give yourself no slack or room to maneuver. It wasn't like maybe I'm imagining that, right? We have a very narrow view, all of us, and how life actually unfolds. But my suspicion is that short of grad school, doing a master's in English, or a master's in political science of some kind, law was the obvious candidate, which is why it worked out. But it's entirely possible. We'll see what happens over the next year, two, three, or four, that I find myself at a firm somewhere or in a small clinic, because a lot of the terminology I found since you've been chatting is has neat parallels in the legal field, like clinics and
Mhm.
these hands-on sort of things.
Mm.
It's entirely possible that I'll hate it, but at the very least, it's valuable training, and it's a helpful to make any sort of foray into a different career. But It's been weird, and this is why I'm doing this fundamentally, is because I miss my friends, and I'm taking an opportunity to chat with people I otherwise wouldn't have, because you and I would have said, "Oh, let's meet somewhere halfway, or let's get a drink, let's get the group together." And we've had those exchanges before. And look, it's been 3 years since England, and it went by like that. And
The time
so
flies so quickly.
it does, and it does when you're busy. But the problem for me became that it was automation, and so I wasn't even enjoying what I was doing. I had this, and I'll conclude my long diatribe by just saying that when I picked this path, what happened was everything was devoted to getting in. And so when I got in, it was like I had to redefine myself. So it was like, okay, well, I got in, but life, that wasn't it. The end credits don't roll. Like I have to keep doing this. So it's been a learning experience. It's basically March to try to understand, why do I like doing this? Do I? How do I fit it in? And chats like these and chats with you reveal to me that it is worthwhile. And as you say, how you can do all those things, how you can find yourself a clinic, or work in a hospital, or with the school board, or open your own practice. I mean, those are almost all equivalent to what you can do as a lawyer or in the legal field. So it's amazing how a lot of human endeavor is quite similar no matter what you're doing. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, there's so much diversity and like so many different options that makes it really appealing because you have so many doors that are open.
mhm. So what I'm wondering how to, I don't want to conclude. I never want to conclude, but I'm just wondering what the next what's something you're looking forward to in the next, if not before December 31st, let's say, then January or Feb, because I'm also in this whole time, in this experience of COVID, I'm also looking for, glimmers of hope, and not signs of normal life, but more so signs that certain sections of the population, be it law students or people in SLP. Is it in SLP? Because I know it's speech language pathology, but you'd also be a speech language pathologist. So I guess both work.
Yeah, both work.
So for someone in your position, I'm wondering what the next 3 or 4 months holds. Is there anything exciting on the way? I know you're applying for jobs, and of course, best of luck. I hope you get them all. But what do the next 3 4 months look like for you, if you had to guess?
Um, yeah, so like you said, I am applying to jobs. The way it works is we have to do a mentorship period. So you can make it like an equivalent to sort of a residency in a way. Like when you're a resident, you're a doctor. In this case, I am going to be an SLP, but I am still doing a mentorship period. Um, it lasts about 6 months, uh, depending on how many hours you do. So in the next 6 months, hopefully I get a job. I start the job and then I finish my mentorship in about 6 months. And then from then on out, I'm a full SLP, ready to do whatever I'd like. The world is my oyster.
So the mentorship is a paid position. That's what you're
Yes.
applying for. Got it. Okay.
So you're applying to jobs like anyone else, but in that job, you'll have a SLP as a mentor that essentially is just a person that you can go to for questions. So if you are with a client and there's something that you're maybe like, oh, I have a question about this, you could just reach out to them and they're there for you. Just for the 6 months, like while you kind of get started and you get to know all of the like the legal aspects of it too as you're like getting into the practice. It's also just like good to have. This is only the case in Ontario, not the case in other provinces. But here they have that just as a support to get you going.
I think that's a brilliant idea. And in the legal context, you don't have to, but well, let me take a step back. It depends again on what jurisdiction you're in, but it's pretty much and this is interesting because it's almost like a human universal, because what you're describing, Mauricia, is not entirely foreign to how people have been conducting their business for centuries. Like you can be an SLP, a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. It doesn't matter. if you're young as we are and you need to make inroads into a new career, it makes perfect sense that someone who's been there and who's done it will guide you along the way. And I'm always fascinated. I sprinkle in these chats with some philosophical sort of observations because I find them to be relevant. But this one would simply be what I just said, which is that what you're describing is seems so valuable. And intriguingly, I didn't find that it was weird because as you progress in building a career and then getting out the door, these avenues are available to you. And as you say, they're actually necessary before you can get going. Um, but in undergrad and in undergrad and graduate school, there are opportunities, there are mentorships, and you can sign up for them and find an older peer and da da da. But as far as an entrenched sort of institutional professional norm, there isn't so much of that. So it's interesting how I'm just making observations at this point, but that's exciting. So it's a one-on-one though, eh? It's you and another SLP.
Yeah, so I will be doing a regular practice like any other SLP, but I have somebody that works on the same site and they'll be like a point of contact essentially.
Okay. Well, you need to do me a favor, please. And this was a tremendous favor, taking the time to do this.
Oh yeah, no
Um,
problem.
so here's what you need to do for me.
Okay.
Your please and thank you. Please, the moment you get that job, and you will, alert me to that, and then I will give you 60 or 90 days. Actually, it depends how busy you are, but I would but in a period of anywhere from 60 to 120 days, I expect a full report because I want to know what it looks like and I want to hear more about it because all you've done, my friend, is you've left me with more questions, which means we had a good chat because I'm riveted by how much, and me of all people, selfishly, I'm fascinated by it because I talk too much anyway, and the gift of gab can be taken away from you in pretty horrific ways. So I'm fascinated by all of this, and I want to hear more about it. If you had, okay, here's my concluding thought. If you had a go-to resource for anybody who was fascinated by this or at all curious about what it is being an SLP is, is there like a touchstone book that everybody knows? Is there a resource that everybody should be aware of, or even something that you found interesting, like a paper or an article along the way in your grad studies? Because I even remember some papers I really loved. um, so you don't, I'm putting you on the spot, but if you don't have one, add that to the the items that need reporting on in a few months time. But I'm just wondering if you have like a go-to sort of resource that a lot of people could just look up and learn about.
The only thing that came to mind right away was a website. So I don't know about a book or a journal article. There are many out there for sure.
Hmm, hmm.
I feel like each one will only touch upon one little tiny aspect of SLP, and I don't think that will do it justice. So a website would do it better justice. I think it would be better. So SAC is the Speech, Language, and Audiology Canada Association. And on that website, they have information about everything, not only SLP, but audiology as well. So if you want more information, you can go to that website and read about it. But I'm sure you'll look at it and probably have more questions for me, and I'm happy to answer them. So,
That's part of the
well,
plan. That
yeah.
I'm going to learn nothing because it's going to be too complex for me. And so I'll learn enough just to be able to ask you more questions, which is part of my master plan here anyway. But and that's SLAC or SAC?
SAC.
SAC. Audiology. Incredible.
Mhm.
Well, my friend, thank you for taking the time. It was so wonderful to see you again.
No problem. Yeah, it was so nice seeing you again too.
Thank you for your patience. My toothpaste stain, it's dried now. I
Is
I
it
I
actually?
I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, it was water, it wasn't toothpaste, right? But I
Yeah, no,
thought
no.
it was a big boy, and I thought there's no way this is gonna be dry in time, but it has dried. Um,
Oh, and my Oxford sweater. I didn't even get a chance to.
Probably there you go. Probably you see the hat? I mean, it's all deliberate. It's
Oh yeah.
all um you probably bought it that day with the crazy lady in the store who was taking her time and holding up the entire world behind her.
Yeah, that was
Um
the punching hat.
No, 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 your sweater I'm talking about.
Oh, the
Wasn't it from
sweater.
there?
Maybe. I don't
We're gonna pretend it was. It makes it more. It makes it a bigger triumph if you had to wait for
know.
crazy old ladies. Okay, Mauricia, good luck.
All right.
And then
Thank you.
please, what I'll do, and this is my standard process with this, is I'll just leave this unlisted, and if you're happy with it, we didn't say anything crazy, but if you're happy with it, let me know. Just flip around. Yours was the best signal quality I've had in the last few, 4 or 5 chats, which is really nice because others have been choppy. I think we both froze for like a second, so we're in good shape.
Yay, that's awesome. I think it's because I use Zoom so much with my own clients, so needs to be good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon. And please keep me abreast with everything because I'm it's so nice to see you. It's so nice to hear from you again. And I know a lot of very interesting people and I have a lot of very interesting friends and you are chief among them. So I'm curious to learn more as you keep going. So good luck and let me know how it goes.
Okay, I will. I'll let you know. We'll have another chat soon. Okay?
Absolutely.
All
Okay.
right, thanks.
Bye.
Thanks
Thanks
for having
again.
me. Bye.